Always one in the pursuit of discovery, rather than be discovered, Gary was being summoned to Frick Junior High's, Mrs. Hazel Jory's counseling office. Mrs. Jory was also Gary's English teacher as well as the low 7th grade counselor. He instinctively concluded that something must be forthcoming about his difficulty with the grammar structure in English class. Never to be judgmental, but known to render an observation, the 7th grader wondered what he had done to warrant a bidding from this austere iconic-looking monument of discipline. She bore a remarkable resemblance to Nelder Refus, another epitome of chastisement he endured in the 5th grade at Burkhalter Elementary. Braving the unknown, he stood at her doorway expecting a disciplined expression and a commanding oratory. But instead he received a smile and an invitation to be seated. Once seated, the interview began, Mrs. Jory explaining the reason for his presence was his academic future. That this was an initial interview for students concerning their course of scholastic endeavor. Students could select from 3 alternative studies: vocational, business or college preparatory. The counselor explaining this assessment was preliminary in determining the student's future course of study. The farthest thought from the 7th grader's mind was choosing class subjects, especially knowing electives would not be a prerogative until the 8th grade, but having already come to a decision that college was his objective. He was aware as a college prep major he would have to attain at least 2 years of a foreign language, chemistry, physics and subsequently 4 years of higher math, starting with algebra through calculus. He did bring it to Mrs. Jory's attention he was interested in taking a half semester of each of the vocational shops as an elective in the 8th and 9th grade. With the interview concluding, his train of thought returned to what was really on his mind that day, something he had planned to do when school let out. After school, Hank and Don almost always walked up Foothill Boulevard to Seminary Avenue, to board the bus for the journey home. Gary sometimes joining them, but finding the first bus was always crowded, and on many occasions you would have to stand with no empty seats, which was inconvenient with an armful of books. Some days he preferred to amble along the path behind the school, above a storm drainage canal running diagonally between Brand Street and 62nd Avenue, 60th and Camden. Then wait for the second bus at the Camden stop on Seminary Avenue, but on this day his normal routine would differ. Leaving the school grounds, taking his time, he crossed 62nd and Brand Street to the path above the drainage canal, but this time stopping at the open storm drain canal's source, a large cement entrance opening, going under Camden Street. Climbing down the embankment, the canal having a small amount of flowing water. The opening edifice showing signs at one time of being gated. This was not just a large storm sewer pipe but more like a tunnel, and from the chalked markings on the entrance walls, he deciphered that many others had entered into this chasm of darkness. He stared into the black void, judging that there must be a turn in the darkened tunnel, otherwise daylight would be visible at the other end. Making a decision to access the passage, assuring himself that this wasn't much different from his entering the darkened sulfur mines on Leona Creek. Entering, touching the wall and looking back at the entrance opening behind him as a way to maintain a bearing, knowing as long as you can see a lighted opening, even if it's located behind you, gives one a sense of reckoning. It was decision time after progressing deeper into the catechism. Giving thought to reversing his direction when the aperture made a subtle turn, and he could see the glow of daylight now in front of him. Continuing towards the light, finally stepping out into the bright daylight. His destination accomplished, gazing about searching for some familiar landmark. It wasn't very difficult to find a benchmark. He was across the street from the entrance gate to Mills College on MacArthur Boulevard. Later, upon further investigations, discovering the weathered drainage canal originated at Lake Alviso, known as Green Lake, located on the college campus and whose water source was no other than another exploratory that he had experienced, Leona Creek. The enlightened 7th grader would share his experience with others, learning that he wasn't solitary in his discovery. Still, he felt an embracing perception of nostalgia from acquainting a familiar cohort with this new discovery, now knowing the disposition of Leona Creek, its inauguration, and its final destination.